news coming in. Massive protests in Bangladesh. Violence has erupted overnight after the death of a student leader. Now, the offices of two leading dailies have been gutted by angry mobs. They were protesting at the Indian High Commission. This is stone pelting that has been reported at the Indian ambassador's home as well. So, India has issued safety advisory for citizens in Dhaka as the army has been deployed on the streets and journalists have been attacked by protesters. This is the Bangladesh Interim government chief who is appealing for peace. Now, over 30 plus stranded journalists and staff of Daily Star newspaper rescued by Bangladesh Army and Fire Brigade using a sky ladder in Dhaka. All of them had taken shelter at the rooftop after radical mobsters set the building afire after launching a major attack. Major tragedy has been averted with the advisory that is being put out particularly for Indian nationals and students by the Indian High Commission in Dhaka. Now, there has been a march, a protest in front of Indian assistant, the High Commission, and this is over the death of the, leader, the student leader. Now, while it is the interim government chief that is appealing for peace, as it is a prominent leader of the July uprising and a spokesperson who was shot dead last week. He died on Thursday night while undergoing treatment at a Singapore hospital after fighting for his life for 6 days. Protests have erupted overnight since his death.
Actually, just after spreading the news that Sharif Osman Hadi is a very popular young protester and leader of last year's mass uprising, through which nearly 16 year long authoritarian ruling of Sheikh Hasina was dethroned. And after hearing the news, students and youth brought out on the street, and just look behind me, there is fire and people, especially youth, are agitating here. And the house of former the students are claiming whom as fascist Sheikh Hasina and her father's house here, and they are demolishing the house. It was already demolished last year, you know that, and now they are also trying to demolish the rest part of the house. Actually, this is the expression of anger of the students and protesters. They say that Hadi was a voice against tyranny. Hadi was a voice in favor of democracy. So after the killing of Hadi, they are now demanding immediate punishment of the killer. And they already attacked the Prothomalo and Daily Star, two prominent newspapers, because according to their statement, these two newspapers from the very beginning reported in favor of fascism. So they are so much agitated against the two newspapers. However, army and other law enforcers some moment back took position in front of that two newspapers. And now the agitated young students and protesters are here in front of Dhanmondi, in front of the house of former President and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. And they are promising that until the punishment of the killer, they would continue their peace movement. And this house that they consider as the icon of fascism should not be stand anymore here. So they are working to demolish the rest part of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's house.
Right, thank you for getting us all those very details. And senior journalist Rubaid, in fact, is explaining to us the sequence of events and how the protests actually unfolded.
The latest that we have from Dhaka is that around 10:30 p.m., just after the news that broke out from Singapore that Osman Hadi, the Inquilab Mancha or the Inquilab platform convener, has died of his bullet wound attained almost a week back from an assassination attempt, has died. Dozens of protesters gathered at Shahbag, a center point in Dhaka, and started protesting and slogans and calling out for trials of those who were responsible for the killing. And as we have seen for the last 4, 5, 6, 7 days, that the rage, the protest, the fury has been building up regarding this particular incident, the assassination attempt now, attempt of murder of Osman Hadi, that the killer allegedly escaped from the law enforcement agencies and escaped the country itself. When these alleged reports came out in the media, the supporters of Osman Hadi got furiated, and the fury and the grief was sort of building up. And what we see today in Dhaka, we are hearing a big gathering at Shahbag, and a big protest is going on in Shahbag. This is the result of the accumulation of the 4, 5, 6 days, what we have seen in the capital of Bangladesh. Also, I would like to confirm that there is a protest in front of the Indian High Commission in Chittagong. It's a sit-in protest, and also the supporters of Osman Hadi are arranging that, and they're sitting in front of the IHC Indian High Commission in Chittagong. So things are heating up, and we'll surely will see some updates on these incidents that have been going on. And as I've mentioned, I would like to mention it again that this is not a separate incident. It has been building up for 3, 4, 5, 6 days. So this was the latest from Dhaka.
Right, thank you so much for joining us with those very details. We also have Saurabh Gupta with us. Saurabh, take us through, what we're hearing as our senior journalist Rubaid Iftikhar was explaining to us, that protesters are now attempting to march towards the Indian diplomatic premises, and that is something which is very concerning, and an advisory has been issued by the Indian government.
Well, this is concerning, and this is something that obviously we've been reporting on. Now, these protests haven't erupted overnight. These are planned protests. And what we've been reporting is that there is an effort to somehow pin the blame on India. Now, while there is no evidence to suggest, or any foundation to suggest, that India has anything to do with the law and order situation in Bangladesh, there are groups within Bangladesh that want to somehow pin the responsibility on India. Internal law and order situation is something that the government of Bangladesh is responsible for. However, you all know there's also elections in February, and many within Bangladesh believe that there are groups that don't want that election to take place. They want to somehow disrupt that election, and looking for an external enemy is something that perhaps is an easy way to deflect responsibility for the law and order situation. That's something that many Bangladesh watchers believe is happening, with the focus on India. Now, as far as the protests are concerned, what's coming in, the reports that are coming in from Bangladesh are quite concerning. In fact, several news agencies are also reporting, that there are mobs that have, attacked, newspaper offices, in Koran Bazaar. And this is something that happened at around midnight, and the rest, and the journalists have had to be rescued. There are also other reports, like you said, of reports of protests around the Indian mission there. And there's also, we were just pointing out, there are protests in Chittagong also. But the ultimate goal of these protests is somehow to pin the responsibility on India. Now, we all know that there are Islamist radicals that are now entering the scene in Bangladesh. These are people who have links to Pakistan. There are people who have supported Pakistan even during the liberation struggle. Forces like the Jamaat-e-Islami Bangladesh have obviously closer ties to Pakistan, and the interim government in Bangladesh has openly stated that it wants to pursue closer ties with Pakistan. Now, as a result of that, we've seen high-level military visits from Pakistan to Bangladesh, and also ISI officials have been visiting Bangladesh. Now, many are saying that, all of this is not coincidental, that all of these things could be linked, and there is somehow an attempt to try and deflect the responsibility for the internal law and order situation in Bangladesh ahead of elections on India. India has very clearly insisted in a statement, the Ministry of External Affairs of India has said that the Bangladesh interim government, led by Chief Advisor Muhammad Yunus, who's equivalent to Prime Minister, must ensure law and order and a situation where elections can take place in a peaceful atmosphere so that Bangladesh can return to an elected government with a mandate from the people, unlike what it has now, which is an interim government, which many also believes wants to extend its stay on power. And that's something that many believe can also be made possible if elections don't take place on time, which is February, which is the date that has been announced. So this is a situation that's unfolding in Bangladesh. It's a complicated situation. It's something that many are watching in India with concern.
A lot of concern here because there were anti-India slogans that one heard, and of course, the demand is to shut down the Indian High Commission there. That is the demand of the protesters.
Yes, that's one of the demands, but what we've seen and what we've heard in Bangladesh is far worse than just shutting down the High Commission. There have been calls to, dismember the northeastern states of India. There have been calls to create disturbance in India. There have been anti-India statements made by leaders of the group called the National Citizens Party, the NCP, which is, of course, an offshoot of the protests that took place in August 2024, leading to the ouster of the Sheikh Hasina government. Now, in that situation, what many believe that these groups also have ties to the Chhatra Shibir, which is the students' wing of the Jamaat-e-Islami Bangladesh. And therefore, many are saying that this is not something that's out of the blue. Yes, this is an unfortunate incident. There is someone who was a candidate. There is someone who has been shot dead, and that is worrying and that is worrisome given that elections are due. But to pin the responsibility on India and to somehow hold India responsible for this is far-fetched, is not based on any evidence. And, this is something that many believe is pre-planned, that there is an attempt to somehow drag India into this internal law and order situation so that there is an external enemy to pin the blame on, while the law and order situation in Bangladesh goes from bad to worse. There are attacks on minorities, not just Hindus. There are also attacks on other minorities, including Ahmadiyas, including, Bauls. All of these communities are facing attacks under the interim government. So who is responsible for all of that?
Some of the attacks also include, properties linked to the former ruling government.
Yes, and now there are elections to be held. And, if we've seen in several places where if there is a problem with one group, then you allow elections to be held and you allow the people to reject that group. Now, in this case, yes, the Awami League has been banned. It's been banned from participating in the elections for quote-unquote crimes against the people of Bangladesh, crimes against humanity, for which the former Prime Minister who fled from the country has been sentenced to death by what we know as the ICJ. I beg your pardon, for what we know as the, International Crimes Tribunal, ICT, I beg your pardon. And that is something that has happened in Bangladesh. And that's why, there is this ban on the Awami League. But again, that also has been questioned by many quarters, saying, does that mean that the elections are truly democratic? Because you have one major group that was in power that's effectively been banned from contesting in the elections. So all of those questions are there. But the larger question to look at in these protests is, yes, there is an unfortunate incident in the death of Sharif Osman Hadi. He was flown to Singapore for treatment, but he was attacked, he was shot at. But the fact is that why try and look for an external enemy rather than fix the situation within Bangladesh, which is there is a law and order situation which the interim government is clearly responsible for.
Right, of course, and it is the media houses that have been torched, they have been targeted. There's been a lot of vandalism that's been recorded and reported out of media houses.
Absolutely. What we are seeing is also there has been some sort of an attack on, what we know as a very, very well-known daily in Bangladesh, the Daily Star. And what we're being given to understand, at least from reports that are coming in on the wires, on different wires, is that, a mob has attacked the office of the Daily Star in Kauran Bazar, area of Dhaka. And what we know is that, also other, publications that we've seen, have sort of been targeted. And this is something that obviously, is again worrying, because, when you have attacks on the media in Bangladesh, then what does it signify? It signifies that the interim government of Bangladesh is completely losing control of the law and order situation. The streets are being taken over by Islamist radicals, groups like the Jamaati Islami Bangladesh, which are now running amok in the country. And somehow, to blame all of this on India is perhaps the easiest way to escape responsibility by the interim government. The attack that took place on Sharif Osman Hadi. Now, that is something that happened, unfortunate incident, no doubt. And to try and pin that, to try and somehow deflect responsibility for the internal law and order situation in India is something the interim government has been desperately trying to do. But while you have groups like the radical Islamist groups taking over the streets, while you have the interim government pursuing closer ties with Pakistan, a country that raped, murdered, committed untold atrocities on the people of Bangladesh during the liberation struggle. And so, it's a very worrying situation. In fact, the report that that committee that's headed by Shashi Tharoor also put out on Bangladesh is worrying, because there is a growing radicalization and radical forces are taking over. Cosmopolitan places are shrinking, freedoms are shrinking, minorities are under attack. There's also a law and order situation, and we know that eventually all of this will affect the elections. And many within Bangladesh believe that that's exactly what's happening here. Somehow create a law and order situation, blame it on an external, enemy, try and produce and portray a friendly country, India, that's always been friendly to the people of Bangladesh. India has invested in Bangladesh, not just, in terms of the relationship that it had.
Let's, hold that thought. Let's listen in to what Yunus at the moment, Mohammed Yunus, has to say about the death and also the violence that has erupted since.
আগামী দিনগুলোতে আমাদের সবাইকে ধৈর্য, সংযম, সাহস ও দূরদর্শিতার সঙ্গে এগিয়ে যেতে হবে, যাতে নির্বাচন ও গণতন্ত্রের শত্রু ফ্যাসিস্ট সন্ত্রাসী অপশক্তিকে চূড়ান্তভাবে পরাজিত করা যায়। এই শোকের মুহূর্তে আসুন আমরা শহীদ শরীফ ওসমান হাদির আদর্শ ও ত্যাগকে শক্তিতে পরিণত করি, ধৈর্য ধারণ করি, অপপ্রচার ও গুজবে কান না দেই এবং যে কোনো হঠকারী সিদ্ধান্ত থেকে বিরত থাকে। যারা দেশকে অস্থিতিশীল করতে চান তাদের ফাঁদে পা না দিয়ে আসুন আমরা সবাই ঐক্যবদ্ধভাবে গণতন্ত্র, ন্যায় বিচার ও গণমানুষের অধিকার প্রতিষ্ঠার পথে অবিচল পদক্ষেপে এগিয়ে যাই।
Saurabh with us. Saurabh, we just heard Mohammed Yunus there, appealing for calm and peace. Of course, he's called it an irreplaceable loss when it comes to the student leader's death. Take us to the investigation, because the manhunt continues for those responsible for the death of the student leader.
Yes, as far as the investigation is concerned, it seems that the attackers, there are people in custody in connection with the investigation and the probe that's taken place, but it seems that some may have fled the country. That's something that obviously Bangladesh has to pursue, in terms of the probe, and get them back and see how they can sort of face trial if they are responsible for what has happened, and in fact the death of Sharif Osman Hadi, who was shot. But at this point, what is more worrying is that, two of the major newspaper offices in Bangladesh have been attacked. And why have they been attacked? What have the newspapers got to do with the death of Sharif Osman Hadi? These are questions that the interim government cannot run away from. I mean, obviously there are larger factors at play here, that are forces that are taking over the streets of Dhaka and other cities of Bangladesh. Islamist radical forces that are running amok. There are rights of minorities that are being trampled upon. Ahmadiyas are coming under attack. Sufis are coming under attack. And there is a hardline stance that, is being propagated. And in all of this, one cannot, sort of rule out how the interim government wants to pursue closer ties with Pakistan.